Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Today channel. Thomas punches Ridge, tells Ridge 6 shocking words. Luna is trapped as Thomas's rage explodes and Rana the socialite appears. Rana the socialite will arrive while Thomas Forrester is in a fit of rage. Luna Nozawa will also be stuck and will need to decide how to proceed. Thomas will take a painful trip down memory lane at Forrester Creations and complain about all the times Brooke Logan has destroyed his family's happiness. While Brooke might jump to her own defense, Thomas will become more irate and possibly even unstable. Naturally, since Ridge Forrester recently declared that he is unable to wed Taylor Hayes, things will only get worse. This marriage isn't going to work out, even if Taylor tried to persuade Ridge not to leave her for Brooke. In the upcoming episodes, we'll see if Thomas targets Brooke in any way because Taylor's destruction can set him off in a huge way. Although Thomas will undoubtedly attack Ridge, he could choose to place the majority of the responsibility on Brooke and seek retribution. Later, Rana the socialite will stop by Forrester Creations for a beautiful Forrester gown, so there will be a diversion. During this visit, Rana will also learn about Brooke's romantic life, although Brooke won't be aware that Ridge has already broken up with Taylor. According to other BMB spoilers, Lee Finnegan will show more stern affection. From Lee's perspective, Luna must understand that Will Spencer is not a suitable romantic partner for her. And speaking of Will, Liam will help him figure out the source of the mysterious phone messages. Will wind up in Lee's apartment, trapping Luna in the bathroom while he commands whoever is there to leave. It will be a pivotal moment as Luna decides whether to remain where she is or give in to Will's pressure and start the next round of chaos. She might seize another chance to divert Carter Walton from Hope Logan with Daphne Rose. Daphne can emphasize Hope's enduring relationship with Liam and persuade Carter that carrying on with the engagement will only result in pain. Liam might take advantage of Hope since she will battle with her affections for him and her growing skepticism about being married. Blows, Thomas Forrester will be offended by Ridge Forrester's choice. Let's discuss the upcoming events in the CBS soap opera as you continue reading. The choice made by Ridge Forrester. Let's begin with Ridge, who recently informed Taylor Hayes that he would not be able to marry her. Many people are attempting to advise him on what to do and who to marry, despite the fact that he is an adult and capable of making his own decisions. Ridge must make this decision on his own. Regardless, Taylor makes a vow that he will never again harm their family. They have been cooperating since Thomas told Taylor that he had told his father to man up. Thomas is heading in a pretty dark direction, so it's not good. Thomas will lose it when he finds out that Ridge called off the engagement, putting Brooke Logan at fault. Indeed, Brooke Logan has been flinging herself at Ridge and pleading with him to be back together. Thomas will, however, give Brooke instructions not to meddle in his parents' relationship. Thomas was unaware of the broken engagement at the time. He will therefore probably accuse Brooke as soon as he finds out that the wedding is off. Rana, a socialite, is assisted by Brooke and Katie Logan in finding the ideal gown. The relationship between Brooke and Ridge will come up somehow. Therefore, it will be interesting to hear the opinion of an outsider. Thomas Forrester, his usually composed features twisted into a mask of raw, undiluted agony, stood trembling before his father, Ridge. Ridge, the patriarch, the artist, the eternal golden boy, regarded his son with that familiar, infuriating mix of disappointment and condescending calm, a look that had dismantled Thomas's confidence his entire life. "You need to let her go, Thomas. It's pathetic. It's beneath you," Ridge stated, his voice a low, dismissive blade meant to surgically remove what he saw as a nuisance. But this time, the blade hit not a nerve, but the very core of Thomas's soul, and the reaction was not a flinch but an eruption. There was no roar, no guttural cry, just a terrifying, silent coiling of Thomas's body before his right fist, fueled by a lifetime of desperate longing for this man's approval and searing hatred for never receiving it, launched forward in a perfect, brutal arc. The impact was not the cartoonish pow of a television brawl, but a sickening, wet thud of knuckles meeting jawbone, a sound that was at once solid and gruesomely organic. Ridge's head snapped to the side with whiplash force, a spray of spittle tracing a faint arc in the lamplight. His legs, those long, confident limbs that had carried him through countless boardrooms and into countless hearts, buckled instantly, betraying him. He crashed into a sleek, minimalist desk, sending a heavy crystal award, some hollow commendation for Innovator of the Year, clattering to the floor, where it shattered like the illusion of his invincibility. He slid down to the Persian rug, a crumpled king in a kingdom of his own making, one hand flying to his already blossoming cheek, his eyes wide not with pain, but with pure, unadulterated shock. This was a language he did not speak, a violation of the natural order he had dictated for so long. He was Ridge Forrester, and he was not hit. He was obeyed, he was admired, he was resented, but he was never, ever struck. Thomas stood over him, his chest heaving, the pain in his hand a distant, secondary fire compared to the inferno in his heart. He looked at the man on the floor, not as a titan, but as a fallen idol, suddenly frail and shockingly human. The rage that had propelled his fist receded in a single, violent wave, leaving behind not remorse, but a chilling, crystalline clarity. This was the moment. This was the line that, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. The carefully constructed facades of father and son, of mentor and protégé, of disappointed god and striving acolyte, lay in splinters around them like the glass from the shattered award. And into that deafening silence, charged with the ghosts of every missed Little League game, every critique of a design, every time Ridge had chosen a new wife over his son, every condescending "it's okay, son, you'll get it next time," Thomas leaned down. His voice, when it came, was not a shout, but a low, venomous, and terrifyingly calm whisper, each word a meticulously chosen shard of glass aimed directly at the center of Ridge's universe. "I am not your son, Ridge." The 6 words hung in the air, not as sounds, but as physical entities, shifting the very gravity in the room. They were so much more than a declaration, they were an annulment. For Ridge, the world did not so much tilt as it simply stopped. The throbbing in his jaw ceased to exist. The taste of copper blood on his tongue vanished. All that existed were those 6 words, assembling and reassembling themselves in his mind, each permutation more horrifying than the last. Not your son. They were an attack on his identity far more profound and damaging than any physical blow could ever be. They struck at the core of his lineage, his legacy, his very reason for being. The Forrester name, the company, the mantle of leadership he was so carefully preparing to pass, it was all predicated on this fundamental truth, that Thomas was his blood, his heir, his continuation. To sever that was to not only rewrite the past but to obliterate the future. For Thomas, the utterance was an exorcism. It was the final, nuclear option he had carried within him, a secret weapon whose launch codes were his own profound misery. He saw the shock eclipse the pain in his father's eyes, and a perverse, devastating sense of power flooded him. This was the ultimate truth he could wield, the one piece of information that could truly, finally, hurt the great Ridge Forrester. It wasn't about paternity. In his heart, he knew the biological truth was almost certainly different. It was about belonging. It was about the emotional reality that Ridge had never truly fathered him, had never seen him as anything but a flawed extension of himself, a disappointing echo. By speaking these words, Thomas was not claiming a new biological father, he was firing the old one. He was resigning from the role of the son, a role he felt he had never truly inhabited to Ridge's satisfaction anyway. He was declaring his independence through the most devastating means possible, scorching the earth of their relationship so that nothing, not duty, not guilt, not even family name, could ever force him to tend to it again. The silence that followed was a living thing, thick and heavy and absolute. It was the silence of a universe collapsing inward. Ridge remained on the floor, a broken man not by a punch, but by a sentence. The words echoed in the plush confines of the office, bouncing off the accolades and the framed family portraits, mocking every single one of them. Thomas, his hand now aching, his body trembling with adrenaline and the aftershock of his own audacity, took a single step back. He had crossed the Rubicon not with an army, but with a fist and a lie wrapped in a deeper truth. He had not just broken Ridge's jaw, he had broken the story of their lives. And as he turned and walked out, leaving his father amidst the wreckage of their shared history, he knew that nothing between them would ever be the same again. The 6 shocking words were not an end, but a terrifying new beginning, a foundational crack in the house of Forrester that would send tremors through every life it touched, forever. Thomas's fury was not the gentle, peaceful quiet of a still evening, but the ominous, pressurized hush of the eye of a hurricane, a fragile, temporary void where the very air seems to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable and catastrophic return of the storm. For weeks, months, perhaps even years, the pressures had been mounting, each slight, each injustice, each gnawing betrayal acting as another tectonic plate grinding relentlessly against its neighbor, storing immense, potential energy deep within the fault lines of his soul. He was a man who had built his identity upon a foundation of control, of quiet competence and rational deliberation. He was the steady hand, the level head, the one who could be relied upon to de-escalate, to analyze, to solve. This perceived strength, however, had become his greatest vulnerability, making him a convenient repository for the frustrations and failings of others, an emotional dumping ground who, they all assumed, would simply absorb the impact and carry on, his endless patience mistaken for an infinite resource. But every reservoir has its limit, every levee its breaking point, and on this utterly unremarkable Tuesday afternoon, in a beige conference room that smelled of stale coffee and weak ambition, the levee finally, spectacularly, shattered. It began not with a shout, but with a silence. The provocation itself was almost laughably mundane, a casually delivered remark from his superior, a man of polished smarm and unearned authority, who, in a meeting meant to celebrate Thomas's team's monumental success, had instead claimed the credit with a breathtaking, offhand arrogance, his words not just stealing the achievement but erasing the months of sleepless nights, the sacrificed weekends, the very essence of their struggle and triumph. The room held its collective breath, all eyes darting to Thomas, expecting the usual, a tight smile, a slight nod, a quiet acceptance of this latest indignity. But the tight smile did not come. Instead, a profound and terrifying stillness settled over him. The light of geniality in his eyes was snuffed out, replaced by a flat, dark emptiness, as if something fundamental had switched off deep within. The air around him seemed to crackle with a sudden, negative energy, and the temperature in the room felt as though it had dropped several degrees. He slowly placed his pen down on the polished table, the click of plastic on wood echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. This was the moment the pressure wave emerged before the sound, the split second of unnatural calm before the world explodes. Then, the eruption. It was not a blind, flailing rage, it was something far more terrifying in its precision and its cold, incendiary heat. It was a fury forged in the smithy of 1,000 swallowed angers, now sharpened to a razor's edge. He did not stand up and pound the table, he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, visceral register that vibrated with a contained, seismic power. "No," he said, the single syllable laden with such finality that it felt like a door slamming shut on an era. And then he began to speak. His words were not a torrent of incoherent insults but a devastatingly accurate, meticulously detailed indictment. He dismantled his superior's narrative not with emotion, but with facts, reciting dates, times, specific failures of leadership, quoted emails, and exposed promises broken with cynical disregard. It was an autopsy of the man's career performed on the man himself, without anesthetic. Each sentence was a scalpel, peeling back layers of hypocrisy and incompetence to reveal the rotten core beneath. He did not raise his voice, he weaponized it, every quiet, hissed word carrying further and cutting deeper than any scream ever could. He spoke of the exploited labor, the dismissed concerns, the stolen ideas, and the corrosive culture of fear and favoritism. He was not just angry for himself, he was the avatar for every person in that room who had ever been overlooked, belittled, or used. His fury was a cathartic lightning strike, and in its blinding flash, every hidden truth was laid bare, every uncomfortable reality exposed to the harsh, unforgiving light of day. The aftermath was a landscape of stunned wreckage. The color had drained from his superior's face, leaving a pale, waxy mask of shock and humiliation. Colleagues sat frozen, some in abject terror, others with a barely concealed spark of vindictive glee in their eyes. The social contract of the office, the unspoken rules of polite complicity, had been atomized in that single, glorious, terrifying minute. As Thomas finished, the silence he left behind was absolute, a vacuum into which all sound and reason had been sucked. He did not wait for a response. He simply stood, collected his notebook with a hand that was remarkably steady, and walked out, leaving the door open behind him, a final, symbolic act of refusing to contain the fallout. The fury had passed, the earthquake had subsided, but the ground had irrevocably shifted. In its wake, nothing would ever be the same. The carefully constructed persona of the agreeable, endlessly patient Thomas was gone, revealed as a facade that had concealed a core of molten steel. He had not lost control, he had, for the first time, taken it completely, wielding his righteous anger not as a wildfire but as a focused blowtorch, and in doing so, he had scorched the earth of his old life clean, leaving it barren, smoking, and ready for something new, something built not on the shifting sands of compromise but on the unshakable bedrock of a truth too long suppressed. His fury was not a loss of self, it was the most powerful, costly, and authentic declaration of self he had ever made. Thomas Forrester could no longer suppress. Ridge's seismic announcement, that he could not, would not, marry Taylor Hayes, had detonated a fault line in Thomas's psyche, and now the aftershocks were ripping through the design house's polished halls. His fury, a tempest long contained behind a facade of reformed tranquility, erupted not with a scream, but with a low, venomous intensity that was far more terrifying. This was not a simple tantrum, it was a volcanic expulsion of years of perceived injustice, and Brooke Logan stood directly in its path. "You just couldn't help yourself, could you?" he seethed, his voice a razor's edge, each word meticulously chosen to inflict maximum damage as he embarked on an excruciating, unpleasant walk down memory lane. "This is what you do. It's your life's work, tearing my family apart, shredding my father's resolve, poisoning every moment of happiness we ever dare to grasp." Brooke, ever ready to defend her territory, whether it be romantic or moral, drew herself up, her own eyes flashing with a Logan's defiant fire. "Thomas, you will not speak to me that way. Ridge is a grown man who makes his own choices." But her protestations were merely fuel on the inferno. Thomas grew increasingly unhinged, his gestures becoming more erratic as he catalogued her sins, from the distant past to the present day, his narrative a twisted tapestry where Brooke was the sole architect of all Forrester misery. "Choices? You haven't given him a choice since the day you set your sights on him. You manipulate, you cry, you play the victim, and he comes running because he's blinded by some pathetic notion that you're his destiny. You ruined my parents' first marriage, you've sabotaged every reconciliation, and now, when they were seconds from finally having the peace they deserve, you slithered back in and sunk your fangs into him again." It was at this precise moment, as Thomas's rage threatened to boil over into something truly irreversible, that the universe, with its impeccable sense of ironic timing, offered a distraction in the form of Rana, the effervescent socialite, who chose that exact second to make her grand entrance. A bubble of oblivious glamour floating into a war zone, she breezed past the tension as if it were merely a new, avant-garde scent. "Darlings, I simply must have a Divine Forrester original for the Getty Gala. Something that will make my ex-husband weep into his champagne flute." Her arrival forced a temporary, brittle ceasefire. Brooke, ever the professional and desperate for any escape from Thomas's accusatory glare, grasped the interruption like a lifeline, pasting on a smile that didn't reach her eyes as she and Katie Logan began to assist the woman. Yet even this sanctuary was violated. In the midst of discussing silks and silhouettes, Rana, with the uncanny knack of the gossipy elite, turned the conversation to the very topic Brooke was trying to evade. "And how is the magnificent Ridge?" Rana trilled, oblivious to the landmine she'd stepped on. "I heard the most intriguing rumor you two were rekindling your legendary flame." "How utterly romantic." Brooke, her heart aching with a confused mixture of hope and guilt, for she was still blissfully unaware that Ridge had, in fact, just chosen her by abandoning Taylor, could only offer a weak, noncommittal response, all under the burning, hate-filled gaze of Thomas, who saw this casual chit-chat as the ultimate confirmation of her treachery. Across town, in a cramped apartment that felt a world away from the opulent drama of Forrester Creations, another soul was trapped, though her prison was one of secrecy and panic rather than fury. Luna Nozawa was cornered, her back pressed against the cold tile of her Aunt Lee Finnegan's bathroom door, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Lee's latest lecture, a fresh dose of brutal, tough love, still echoed in her ears. You need to get it through your head, Luna. Will Spencer is not, and will never be, a romantic option for you. He is a fantasy, and a dangerous one. But fantasy or not, the object of her affections was now on the other side of that very door, having inexplicably tracked a series of cryptic phone messages straight to Lee's apartment. Luna had barely had time to dive for cover before Will, with assistance from a determined Liam Spencer, let himself in. The sound of his voice, so close and yet so impossibly far, sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through her. Hello? Is someone in there? Will called out, his tone a mixture of confusion and growing insistence. Come on, come out. I know you're in there. Trapped, Luna's mind raced, each second stretching into an eternity. Her next move was a precipice. To stay silent was to prolong the agonizing uncertainty, but to open the door was to unleash a maelstrom of questions, revelations, and certain devastation. It was a choice between slow suffocation and a leap into the unknown, a leap that would irrevocably change every relationship in her fragile world. Meanwhile, the romantic chessboard continued to shift around an unsuspecting Hope Logan. As she wrestled privately with a resurgence of feelings for her ex-husband Liam and the gnawing doubts about her engagement to the steadfast Carter Walton, a new player saw an opportunity. Daphne Rose, watching the dynamics with a keen eye, moved in like a grandmaster, ready to capitalize on the hesitation she sensed. In a quiet moment with Carter, she would undoubtedly embrace her chance to gently, persuasively